You can wait outside, clear as day. That's what Patricia Webb told me at the entrance to the Pentagon's ceremonial hall. Behind me, conversations kept going. Dress uniforms everywhere. Metal ribbons catching the light. Nobody jumped in to correct her. I'm Gordon Mills. I'm 54 years old, and let me tell you what happened that night. Look, I've been around the block. Spent 8 years in the Navy working on weapons systems, then 18 more years at Apex Defense Technologies here in Arlington. I design missile guidance systems, the stuff that makes sure our fighters can actually hit what they're aiming at. I had a reputation for getting things right and staying out of office drama. Always figured if you did good work, eventually people would notice. Boy, was I wrong about that. So there I am, holding my briefcase with 18 months of work inside. Missile guidance specs, radar integration protocols, F-35 weapons system documentation. The kind of work that had quietly saved the Pentagon's most expensive fighter program after it was missing targets left and right. Work that nobody ever talked about in meetings. "Excuse me?" I said to Patricia. She looked at me like I was some kind of system glitch. "We're at capacity for the ceremony. This event is restricted access." I looked past her into that hall. Everyone from my department was already sitting down. Every engineer, every project manager, even Jason Cruz, this kid who'd been with us less than a month, had a seat at one of those round tables up front. He was nervously adjusting his new security badge. Here's the kicker. I could see my own work displayed on the big screen behind the stage. My algorithms, my designs, my 18 months of fixing what nobody else could figure out. "I wasn't aware I was excluded," I said, keeping my voice steady. Patricia smiled the way computers smile when they're working perfectly. "Gordon, you're a technical contributor. Tonight is for program leadership and award recipients." Why would we use a seat on support personnel? Support personnel, that hit me harder than the first thing she said. I followed her eyes to the projection screen up front, Defense Innovation Excellence Award, the missile guidance system they were celebrating. Mine, every targeting algorithm, every threat assessment protocol, every precision strike optimization. 18 months of work that took the F-35's accuracy from 67% to 94%. That's the difference between a $400 million fighter that works and one that doesn't. I understand, I said quietly. Here's what they didn't know. I'd been planning for this moment for months, not this exact moment, but something like it. Because I'd finally figured out how this place really worked. I set my briefcase down on a nearby table, opened my laptop, and typed one line, a send command. That's it. Within seconds, phones started buzzing all over that ceremonial hall, one notification, then another. Conversations stopped. People started murmuring. I closed my laptop and walked to the elevator. For the first time in months, I felt completely relaxed. What they didn't understand was how long that email had been sitting in my drafts folder, waiting. You know what? I didn't always see the pattern. At first, it seemed like normal corporate stuff. A presentation here without my name on it. A project summary there that mentioned the engineering team instead of the guy who actually designed it. Small things. Easy to ignore if you wanted to believe the system was fair. When I started at Apex, I did believe it was fair. Fresh out of the Navy. Hired because I could untangle complex weapons systems and find solutions where everyone else saw chaos. My first year, I rebuilt a Patriot missile guidance system that bumped intercept rates up 38%. I redesigned their threat assessment protocols and prevented 2 major friendly fire incidents that would have been all over CNN. None of it made headlines. All of it worked. People noticed, just not in any official way. My boss back then was Roger Hayes. Roger had this reputation for refining presentations before they went to Pentagon briefings. I thought that meant he was cleaning up the technical language. What it really meant was he was putting his name on my work. First time he presented my stuff without mentioning me, I figured it was just an oversight. So I pulled him aside afterward real casual. "Hey Roger, think you forgot to mention I designed that targeting protocol." Roger smiled like he was talking to his nephew. "Relax, Gordon. The Pentagon doesn't care who writes the code. They care that the missiles hit their targets." That sentence stuck with me for months. Every breakthrough after that followed the same pattern. I'd spot a problem, design a fix, document everything, upload it to the company servers. Few weeks later, the solution would show up in a Pentagon briefing with Roger's signature all over it. Promotions would follow, raises would follow. Just not for me. When I finally went to HR about it, they were real polite. Asked me whether I'd done the work during business hours, whether I'd used company equipment, whether I could prove I was the only one who'd worked on it beyond timestamps. The message was crystal clear. If the company benefited, the company decided who got credit, so I learned to keep my mouth shut. But here's the thing they missed. I started paying attention to everything after that. I kept copies of original files on my personal drives, saved version histories, meeting invitations, approval emails, presentation drafts. I noticed how the same names kept showing up next to innovations they had nothing to do with. 18 months before that Pentagon ceremony, I started working on something different, something I told nobody about. I used my own equipment, my own time, my own money. Took the systems they dumbed down and rebuilt them the right way, fixing all the problems they never understood in the first place. I wasn't planning some big revenge scheme. I was just getting ready to work somewhere else. By the time Apex announced they were up for that Defense Innovation Excellence Award, I already knew two things. First, they'd celebrate my work under someone else's name. And second, they had no clue how much their success depended on me staying quiet. That ceremony wasn't the start of anything. It was just when they finally pushed me too far. Once I stopped hoping for recognition, everything became a lot clearer. When you're waiting for someone to notice your work, you second-guess yourself. You soften your opinions. You assume people mean well. But when you accept that credit's never coming, you start seeing things differently. I began looking at Apex Defense not as a bunch of individual people, but as a machine, one that sucked up good ideas and quietly got rid of the people who had them. Roger wasn't some bad guy. He was just how the machine worked. He encouraged innovation, but only behind closed doors. He praised new ideas, but only when he could rebrand them as department wins. He talked about teamwork all the time, but every Pentagon presentation had one name on it. His. Over time, everyone else figured out the rules. Engineers stopped sharing their best ideas. Project managers focused on looking good instead of solving problems. Meetings turned into performance art instead of actual work sessions. And the company slowly started depending on fewer and fewer people who actually knew how to make things work. People like me. I started keeping track of who'd left the company. There was Alan Price from Infrastructure. He'd built this radar detection system that cut false alarms in half before it got absorbed into some leadership initiative. He quit quietly about 7 months later. Then there was Neil Ward from Compliance. Neil created a safety system that kept us out of a congressional hearing, only to watch some VP take credit for it as his strategic insight. Neil was gone within weeks. I reached out to both of them, just casual check-ins. Turns out they'd gone through the exact same thing, same patterns, same excuses, same exhaustion. They didn't leave because they couldn't do the job. They left because they realized there was a ceiling that had nothing to do with how good they were. Those conversations changed how I approached my own work. I stopped giving them complete solutions. I'd share just enough to keep things running, but not enough for them to replace me. I started keeping the most important stuff to myself. The dependencies that nobody else really understood. Nobody noticed. Why would they? The missiles still hit their targets. At the same time, I kept working on my independent framework. What started as a way to keep some control over my own work turned into something bigger. I realized that a lot of the Pentagon's contractors were having to work around Apex's limitations on their own dime. Building workarounds, absorbing delays, putting up with problems because switching providers seemed too risky. I knew how to fix those problems. More important, I knew exactly how much money those contractors were losing by not speaking up. During my 18 years at Apex, I'd learned something valuable. The company's success wasn't built on brilliant leadership or cutting-edge technology. It was built on a handful of people who understood how to make complicated weapons systems actually function. People who kept quiet, fixed problems behind the scenes, and let other people take the credit. That system works fine until those people stop playing along. Look, I'm not some hothead. I'm 54 years old, got 2 kids in college, went through a divorce 3 years ago. I play golf on weekends and collect bourbon. Nothing fancy, just stuff I actually drink. I'm the kind of guy who thinks before he acts. So when I finally decided to do something about my situation at Apex, I made sure I had my ducks in a row. The email I sent that night wasn't angry. It wasn't dramatic. It was just precise, and it was only the first move in a plan I'd been working on for months. Most people probably figured the email was some kind of emotional outburst. They probably imagined a long, angry message full of accusations and hurt feelings. That assumption worked in my favor. It kept them from understanding how short and simple the email actually was. Subject line, notice of operational status change. 4 attachments, that was it. The first one was my resignation letter. Clean, professional, effective at close of business that day. It didn't list any complaints, just referenced a clause buried deep in my original contract. Something about immediate departure if project scope changed without proper disclosure. The second attachment had 8 more resignation letters, not copies. Original letters from senior people Apex needed way more than leadership realized. Infrastructure guys, compliance people, client system specialists, people who'd already lined up their next jobs months earlier, real quiet like. The third attachment was a technical summary, not my whole independent framework, just enough to show where it came from. Timestamped files, version histories, development logs that proved I'd built it on my own time. Anyone with half a brain could see the difference between what the company owned and what I'd created independently. The fourth attachment was the most important one. Notifications to Pentagon contractors, 4 of them. Each one informed a key defense contractor that I was leaving Apex and starting my own shop. Real careful language, no solicitation, no sales pitch, just a heads up. Each letter ended the same way. If you have questions about operational continuity or alternative solutions, I'm available to discuss. That was the whole thing. No drama, no big speech, just facts. I sent it to the executive mailing list, legal department, HR, and the Pentagon liaison office. Then I shut down my laptop and walked to the elevator while the ceremony fell apart behind me. By the time I got to the lobby, my phone was already buzzing. I didn't answer. I walked outside into the cool Virginia evening and waited for phase 2 when people stopped reacting and started calculating. They figured I was replaceable. They figured the systems would keep working because they always had. What they didn't realize was how many of those systems were held together by knowledge that lived in maybe 3 or 4 people's heads. Knowledge I'd been real careful to protect. Not because I was planning anything. Just out of habit. I never designed my work to hurt anyone. I designed it to be right. The first call came before I even got to my car. I didn't look at the caller ID. I already knew who it would be. Here's the thing, when something breaks slowly, management can wait it out. When it breaks all at once, they panic. What happened inside Apex after I left wasn't chaos, not right away. At first, it was just confusion. The ceremony kept going, but awkwardly. They still gave out the award. People clapped, but the timing was off. Smiles looked forced. Then legal opened those attachments. That's when everything changed. Resignations triggered all kinds of review procedures. Pentagon notifications meant risk assessments. The technical summary triggered something worse, recognition. Anyone who looked at it could see the truth immediately. The company's biggest success was built on an incomplete understanding of their own systems. And the guy who completely understood them had just walked away. About 2 hours later, my phone buzzed again. Message from Roger Hayes. Let's talk. This doesn't have to escalate. 6 months earlier, that might have worked. I didn't respond. What Roger and the others didn't know was that I'd already talked to an employment lawyer twice. We'd gone over my contract, my documentation, my development logs. Every step had been measured against legal risk. Not emotion. I wasn't burning bridges. I was stepping off them. Around 11 that night, I finally checked my voicemail. 16 messages. The shortest one mattered most. Linda Foster, Apex's Chief Operating Officer. Gordon, this is Linda. We need immediate clarification on operational status. Clarification, that's corporate speak for we want control back. I waited until the next morning to respond. Not with a phone call, but with an email. 1 paragraph, professional and direct. I confirmed my resignation. I confirmed my work was independent. I confirmed I was available for questions about documentation the company already owned. Nothing more. Within minutes, the tone changed completely. Meeting requests started coming in. Titles got mentioned. One message talked about correcting an oversight. Another suggested realigning recognition structures. I read them all without any reaction, because the moment they decided I mattered wasn't the moment I needed them anymore. What they hadn't figured out yet was that my leaving wasn't the real crisis. The timing was. Pentagon contractors had already started asking questions. Not accusations, questions. About continuity, about performance guarantees, about whether the systems they depended on were as stable as they thought. Those conversations hadn't reached Apex leadership yet, but they would, and when they did, Apex would learn something they'd avoided for years. Technical expertise doesn't announce when it's leaving, it just stops holding everything together. I never called the Pentagon contractors first. That detail mattered from Apex's point of view. The risk wasn't that I was leaving. The risk was that I might convince others to leave with me. That assumption guided every response they made over the next 48 hours. Legal reviewed non-compete clauses. Sales drafted damage control language. Leadership prepared their story. They were all solving the wrong problem. The Pentagon didn't need convincing, it needed reassurance. And they weren't calling because I'd invited them to. They were calling because weapons systems don't lie about their performance. Within 24 hours of my resignation email, things started slowing down. Minor problems appeared in monitoring systems. Nothing catastrophic, just enough friction to trigger alerts on the contractor side. Engineers at those companies began tracing issues back to their source. They always led to the same place, my work. By late afternoon, I had 3 voicemails from Pentagon technical people. Not salespeople, not executives. The engineers who actually monitored missile performance. They didn't ask where I was going, they asked if I was still available for consultation. I called each one back, real careful about what I said. I explained I was no longer with Apex. I confirmed I had no authority over their current contracts. I answered questions about documentation they already had and clarified what I could without crossing any lines. I didn't offer anything, and the implications were still obvious. That evening, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. I answered it. "Gordon," a man said after a pause, "this is Scott Young. I oversee defense integration at the Pentagon." The Pentagon was Apex's biggest client. "I understand you're no longer with Apex," he continued. "We've been told everything's stable, but my team says the targeting architecture depends on decisions only you fully understand." I let him talk. "We're not looking to breach any agreements," Scott added. "We just need to know what options exist if continuity becomes an issue." That was the real question. Not will you help us, but what exists beyond this mess. I told him the truth. I was building something independent. It wasn't operational yet. When it was, it wouldn't be a copy of Apex's system, but a cleaner framework designed to eliminate the problems that created these dependencies in the first place. He didn't interrupt once. At the end of the call, he said, "Keep us informed. Not good luck, not we'll see. Keep us informed." By the end of that week, I'd had similar conversations with 3 other major contractors. All of them initiated the calls, all of them documented by me, all handled without making any promises. Inside Apex, panic was turning into desperation. They offered me a retention bonus big enough to buy a new truck. Then a title change, then equity language that hadn't existed in my contract before. Roger sent me a message that tried to sound personal. "You didn't have to do it like this." He was wrong. This was the only way it could have happened. Because if I'd warned them, if I'd tried to negotiate first, they would have delayed, watered it down, redirected everything. They always did. By not calling first, I forced the truth to come out on its own. And once it did, there was no putting it back in the box. The meeting request showed up on Friday morning. No subject line, just a calendar block from the executive office marked mandatory, scheduled for early afternoon. No agenda, no conference call number. In person only. That was new. I accepted without comment. When I walked into Apex headquarters, the whole building felt different, quieter. Conversation stopped when I walked by. People avoided eye contact, not because they were hostile, but because they were calculating. Word had spread faster than management expected. The conference room was packed. Roger sat at the far end, hands folded too tight. Linda Foster was there with 2 lawyers I'd never met, and some guy in a plain suit who didn't introduce himself. Board representation, probably. Linda pointed to an empty chair. "Thanks for coming, Gordon." I sat down. She didn't waste time. "We underestimated your role." 6 months ago, that admission would have meant something. Now it just sounded like procedure. "Your resignation created exposure we didn't anticipate," Linda continued. "Client confidence is shaken." One of the lawyers slid a folder across the table. Inside were printed copies of my documentation, the same files I'd attached to my email. They'd been reviewed carefully now, highlighted, annotated. "We'd like to discuss options," Linda said. "Retention, revised responsibilities, direct reporting." Roger finally spoke up. We can correct the record. I looked at him, publicly. He hesitated. That was my answer. The board guy leaned forward. Gordon, what you built is valuable, but value doesn't have to come at the cost of alignment. I met his eyes. Alignment with what? With the structure, he said finally. That was the heart of it. They weren't afraid of losing me. They were afraid of losing the system that let them absorb good ideas without giving credit where it was due. Linda let out a slow breath. What would it take for you to stay? I didn't answer right away, not to be dramatic, but because I wanted to be accurate. I won't. I said finally, but I'll be clear about why. They listened. I didn't leave because of money. I left because the system here treats contribution like raw material and recognition like a privilege. You can change titles, you can change reporting structures. But you don't plan to change that system. Linda didn't deny it. What happens next, I continued, is up to you. I'm not going after your clients. I'm not attacking your company. I'm just not preventing the natural consequences of decisions you've been protected from. The board guy closed his folder. You understand this will get worse? Yes, I said. That's why I prepared. I stood up, nodded once, and left. This time, nobody tried to stop me. They finally understood that something fundamental had shifted. Not the balance of power, the direction of it. 6 months later, I walked into a different conference room. This one was at the Pentagon, part of an industry advisory board meeting. Engineers, operators, decision makers who cared less about titles and more about systems that actually worked. I hadn't asked to be on the program. They'd invited me. As I stood near the podium, waiting for my turn to speak, I thought briefly about that night when Patricia Webb told me to wait outside. How small that moment had felt then and how big it had become. Apex still existed. It hadn't collapsed. Companies like that rarely do. But it had changed shape. Several executives had quietly moved on. Defense contracts had been redistributed. Their press releases sounded cautious now, full of disclaimers. My company had grown differently. Slowly, deliberately. We didn't scale by absorbing people. We scaled by being clear about everything. Every system we built could be explained by more than one person. Every decision had a name attached to it, not for blame, but for ownership. Pentagon contractors noticed. Not because we marketed harder, but because they didn't have to guess who understood their weapon systems anymore. When I stepped up to speak, I didn't tell my story the way people expected. I didn't name Apex. I didn't describe the ceremony. I didn't mention the email. Instead, I talked about structural risk, about how organizations fail not when they lose talent, but when they mistake silence for stability. About how systems built on unrecognized expertise eventually forget how they function. At the end, I said something simple. The most dangerous assumption any defense contractor can make is that the people holding their systems together will always stay quiet. There was no applause at first. Then there was. Afterward, several people came up to me. Some asked technical questions, some shared stories they'd never told anyone. Others just said they recognized the pattern. As I left the Pentagon that day, my phone buzzed one more time, message from an unknown number. Apex is restructuring again. They finally understand what they lost. I read it, then put my phone away. Understanding comes late for some organizations. Too late to recover what mattered. I didn't feel satisfaction or bitterness or triumph. What I felt was something simpler, completion. I no longer needed recognition from people who controlled it like a limited resource. I'd built something that didn't require their permission to exist. My son called me last week. He's a junior at Virginia Tech, studying engineering. Dad, he said, I've been reading about your company in Defense Technology magazine. My professors are talking about how you guys are changing procurement standards. That meant more to me than any award ceremony ever could have. Here's the thing I learned, son, I told him. Good work doesn't speak for itself. You have to choose where and how to speak for your work. And sometimes that means walking away from places that won't let you. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, I want to work somewhere like what you built. You will, I said, because now you know the difference. I used to believe that if you stayed quiet and worked harder, things would eventually become fair. This whole experience taught me something different. Excellence doesn't grow in silence. It grows when you decide where to deploy it. And that choice, that's always been yours to make. The system only respects you when it realizes it can't replace you. But by then, you don't need the system anymore. They'll tell you to be patient, that good work speaks for itself. But good work is silent. You have to decide when and where to give it a voice.